with also all types of apps. We have apps that make us better athletes like Strava. We have apps that help us be healthier and diet better like Noom. And it's like, well, we need that for sustainability, and we don't have that. Consumers should be taught how to build the acumen around their carbon management, just like they do with any aspect of their life.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Clean Techies podcast, where we interview ClimateTech founders and VCs to discuss all things building and investing to solve the biggest challenge of our generation, climate change. This is episode 82 of the show. I'm your host, Silas Maynor. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Before we get into today's episode details, just a quick note for any founders listening. If you're a founder in the space seeking funding or looking for partnerships, please reach out and we will make any introductions that we can. Always glad to help. And a big thanks to NextWave Partners for sponsoring this show. NextWave Partners are experts in talent acquisition, recruitment, and retention across the climate tech, renewables, and ESG spaces globally. So if your team is growing or you're looking to make a career change, please do consider reaching out to NextWave at next-wavepartners.com or reach out to one of their consultants directly via their LinkedIn page. So with that, let's get into today's episode. So the conversation today is with Olivia Pedersen, the founder of Sustaio. And Olivia has a really incredible journey building Sustaio. We were able to speak today about their technology, which is really essentially a rewards platform for choosing sustainable products. And this is also a method for consumers to signal to corporate kind of direct-to-consumer brands their interest in sustainable products. So it's a really interesting market signal that I think that they're building here, which is really, really, really cool. One thing we also touched on, which I think is very interesting to consider, was how to solve this issue of women or those who are kind of currently less fortunate in how you can offer them the opportunity to afford to take lower paying climate tech jobs or to go found climate tech companies. Because obviously these people oftentimes have certain responsibilities with family, etc. And there's not exactly an option to take a lower paying job, even if it means doing something that you're more passionate about or helping solve climate change, for example. So a really, really great episode today with Olivia. Glad we were able to share this. So without any further delay, let's get into the show. All right. Welcome to the show, Olivia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Really excited to have you on. I think this is a pretty interesting tech that you're working on, what you guys are doing. So can you just start out from the beginning with telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and how you ended up here?
Yeah, so I come from the design and product world. Over the last 10 years, I've been working in the athletic and outdoor space before starting Sustaio. And I just kind of got sick of being in the business of making more stuff and the negative impact that the outdoor space was having on people and planet. So I left and went to go get my master's in sustainable design. And then during that thesis research, I discovered this obsession I have with my own personal footprint and quantifying that. And how do I know if the moves I'm making have any sort of impact or difference or are making a better, lighter impact in the world? So that's kind of where it all started. And then once I graduated from my master's, that's when, I had really tested it through my thesis and thought I had some teeth and wanted to take it to market.
Mm-hmm. So just tell me a little bit about that process of, I guess, going back. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the program you went to specifically. Was it because it looks like there was a focus on sustainability, and I'm just kind of curious what it was like. I like to ask people's experiences because I know some people have kind of mixed experiences when it comes to university and master's programs.
For sure. Yeah. And I want to start this off by saying I almost didn't go to college. So I was somebody who learned the power of learning at a later stage in life. And it was actually during my freshman year in college when I discovered how powerful just simply reading is and how you can build anything you want. You just have to find the book for it and figure it out yourself. So, I graduated high school with like a C average, I think. I don't remember. And went to junior college, went to a state school in Oregon, or not even, yeah, a state school. And then, I was always obsessed with art and design. And so once I figured out that being a starving artist sucks, that's when I got my degree in design. And then with design, you can work for really cool companies and really cool products and, have a touch on people's lives that way and improving and enhancing their quality of life. So when I found my frustration with the outdoor and athletic industry, it was because of the waste and, the buy more mentality that it had, and all the products sourcing was unsustainable and the supply chains were unsustainable. And so I was like, hey, I already have this tool set of design. I want to go back to school because sustainability has always been a passion of mine, but I want to go back to school so that I can be the expert in sustainability to help these companies do better. And then that's when I became obsessed with what's my own personal footprint. And now Sustaio has really come full circle in helping people manage and measure their footprint, and then being able to interact with these outdoor and athletic companies and retailers to ultimately get rewarded for doing better in the world. So it was really a full circle journey. And that was just my journey. Like, I don't necessarily think university is for everyone. I certainly didn't think it was for me. And then I just kind of ended up with a master's degree. So yeah, that's kind of the way it worked.
I think it's interesting to see people's journey when they realize they don't want to work in just like a plain boring industry, or perhaps even a negative industry that's kind of hurting the planet. It
Mm-hmm.
usually takes people a while to figure out what exactly the opposite of that is, I think, because there's a lot of different areas within climate tech. I know I still think for me, obviously, besides helping people tell their stories, I don't know what that is exactly yet, other than helping with recruitment. But it's really cool to see that journey. So it sounds like, just to kind of maybe recap that, the key thing for me was that through realizing you didn't want to be affecting the planet negatively through the waste, you just kind of you went back on this journey, and then through that process of going to university, you started to realize that you were really interested in the individual impact of your carbon footprint, and that's what kind of led you to test the idea for Sustacio.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then like during that process, that was like a 10-year process, getting my undergrad, getting my master's. And the time in between there it takes to just like be working and turning over rocks and figuring out what you actually like to do. Because after I had my big like downfall in the outdoor industry of just being so disappointed in it, I went and was a raft guide, and then I was a national tour guide, and then, while doing design on the side. So just really explored a lot of leadership roles and a lot of different skill sets, before finally being like, yep, I found the school I like. And that was something I also you originally asked about, was how did I choose the program that I went to? And I didn't really want a program that took me out of the working world 100%. I wanted to stay working full time while I got my master's so I could instantly apply what I was learning to my clients. Because during my master's, I started my own design firm where I was helping people build their own digital marketplaces or brand identities or whatever. It's anything to do with design, really. And so I actually, chose to go to an online part-time program at MCAD, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, that was a master's in sustainable design, instead of going to University of Oregon for their business to get an MBA with an emphasis in sustainability, because I would have had to just go back to the
Mhm.
collegiate life full time, and I just didn't want to do that. So that was how I chose, and it was way cheaper to go online, so that was cool too.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of value. I mean, there's a lot of value to both ways, but I think personally, I don't know if I could ever go back to. I've never went to university myself, but I don't know if I could go back to this school mindset. I like to work. I like to be doing something, out in the workplace. But I do want to talk a little bit about. This might be kind of jumping ahead slightly, but I want to talk a little bit about how did you test your idea? What were the steps you took to test it and see if it had legs and if it was worth pursuing and going out full time on?
Yeah, so with this program, it was basically like an ideas incubator where you learn sustainable frameworks and systems and apply them to business services and product ideas. So this was like my seventh idea I had turned over. And I was just doing a lot of research, market research, in terms of, customer demand for a more sustainable X, whether that's a credit card, a sock, or a car. So across the spectrum, consumers want a more sustainable insert item here. And then, it was just like my personal passion was just in figuring out, like, with also all types of apps, we have apps that make us better athletes like Strava. We have apps that help us be healthier and diet better like Noom. And it's like, well, we need that for sustainability, and we don't have that. Like, climate change is real. We need to get our arms around carbon emissions and accounting. And just in the US alone, there's 330 million people that have a 15 metric ton emissions footprint every year. And that's going unmanaged. And it should probably be given attention to. And consumers should be taught how to build the acumen around their carbon management, just like they do with any aspect of their life in modern day society.
Mhm. So then from that, you just basically you felt the idea had legs. Did you go and like test it by building a like kind of like a one page landing page to get people to see if they would sign up for it, or was there any other things that you took to make that to feel confident about making that leap?
Yeah, so I stayed in like thesis development world for like 2 years, which was hilarious. That was a culmination of a lot of case studies, focus groups, surveys, and then then it went into building where I was just basically building the software on a no code, low code platform. And then once we got into Techstars, that's when we really did a ton of customer discovery. And Sustaio is B2B to C, so we have to do customer discovery on the consumer side and the actual business we want to monetize with. So and there's a lot of different like polls and false signals we got in a lot of different areas. And so that was ultimately what we did during Techstars, was just a ton of customer discovery.
Mhm. How was going through TechStars as a climate tech company? Was this the climate specific program, or was it just a TechStars kind of standard program?
This was the energy tech one. Since the Sustaio score revolves a lot around what you do with your household energy and how you manage it, it was a really cool fit for us because we were the only software company. A lot of those
Hmm.
companies were solar companies or materials companies, drone companies that managed and maintained utility plants and stuff like that. So it was really an awesome look into the world of the utility space and just what happens with energy and how energy works in this country. So with that, we got to see, the back end of how the system works. Because this is a whole systems thinking approach in terms of there's the consumer, there's the business, there's the energy grid. These are all stakeholders in this massive system with a goal of reducing carbon. So um, yeah, it was a really focused program on energy tech, and it was great to be with companies that were hardware companies, totally different from us, and got to get all those different perspectives from them.
Interesting. That does sound like a pretty interesting experience because of the ability to tie it all together. Um, I'd like to talk now about if you want to just kind of shift over to if you could explain in kind of detail, but also very simply as if you were explain it to your grandparents. What exactly are you doing, and who are you working with, and just kind of lay this process out for us.
Yeah, so ultimately we have a consumer app where you can go to Sustaio and get your Sustaio score, and the score ultimately tracks your household energy footprint. And that's household energy as well as water. So you can actually have the real-time data on what moves you're making in your house are doing and how those actually translate to carbon emissions. Um, and that's kind of like where we're starting at. So we're actually doing a massive rebuild right now, and we're going to launch our new product in March of 2023, which I guess is already this year. So in about 3 months, we'll have a new generation of Sustaio Live, where it'll be a really automated experience where a consumer can go to Sustaio, authenticate some of their data, and then ultimately be tracked in real time like a nerd wallet for your climate impact. So we're really excited about that. And then ultimately, and this is kind of I'll have to stay high level with this because it's kind of behind closed doors still, but we're ultimately building rewards that you can redeem in the real world to get better pricing by having a better climate footprint.
Okay, and so this is just specifically for the consumers, correct?
Yeah, so consumers use it and businesses use it. Consumers are the end user, businesses are the monetization and
Hmm.
structure because they're getting the data and value out of their customers, the consumer, by using Sustaio.
Hmm. Could you talk a little bit about, I guess, I'm always curious, and I think it's becoming increasingly important to people, the data side of things, like how is it used? What is it? How do you store this? I'm really unfamiliar with the space, so you maybe have to teach me a little bit about how this works, but would be really keen to see how that's playing out.
Yeah, so the data is all safe and secure. We're actually working towards our SOC 2 cert right now. But ultimately, there's data everywhere as a consumer. There's data on your phone, in your car, in your household. So we're focusing specifically on your home energy footprint, utilizing your kilowatt hours, your therms, your gallons used, and giving you quantifiable data on, okay, did I use less this year than last year? What's my actual like temperature check on how am I doing with managing my energy? Are these smart thermostats I'm installing? Are these weather strips I'm installing making a big difference? And if so, like I want the data on that. So that's really what I'm excited to provide to the world, is this real-time data in an area of our lives that is so very important, but
Hmm.
we're so disconnected from.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like also there's a certain aspect of if I'm not sure where exactly how it's used, but if there's some involvement with the businesses, that it's almost like it's a signal to the businesses to these businesses to start building more sustainable things, right? Because I know people might be a little bit concerned about it, but then they can really say like, hey, I want this product. And then there's going to be the investment to go build those products for the consumers. So ultimately, it's going to lead to more sustainable products. Is that something that your goal is with it as well?
Yeah, exactly. Really thinking about a closed loop system. And if the consumers are demanding certain things, then the businesses will have to meet those demands. Otherwise, they lose market share. But ultimately, it's all about synergy too. And I think we've been, since the Industrial Revolution, been really disconnected from businesses generally and treating them like non-human entities when they are, and businesses are simply a culmination of the decisions that the people make in those companies. And so if we can ultimately give people the agency and the power to manage their sustainability and their climate footprint in their personal lives, imagine how powerful they'll be at work and making better decisions for that company, helping those supply chains go greener and reducing the footprint of the company.
Yeah, that is really fascinating point actually. I think this is something I just thought about in a totally different context today, but the fact that in New York people are typically considered to be a bit rude and just like I'm sure it follows over into the workplaces, right? I have a pretty good workplace that I work at, but I'm sure that a lot of people don't have that, and it's probably because the individual, right? And if you don't have the individual have living a certain way and acting a certain way, the company's not going to do that. So I think that kind of tying that to sustainability, it's quite interesting to get people to be conscious of that. Are you, or did you find right away that there was a lot of people who were interested in this? Was it super like, oh my gosh, we've been waiting for this forever. This is really great. And it just took off pretty quickly? Or did it take a little bit of like kind of figuring out how do we position this so that people feel like it's the right thing? Because I've heard some people in my circles be a little bit skeptical, almost like it's a credit score and they're going to have negative consequences if they choose not to be that way. So I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. And to that question, I would say, imagine the world before the credit score, and imagine the world before you could gain debt and better your quality of life through debt. Like it's really, the credit score has a negative connotation, but without it, we wouldn't be able to get better pricing in the world based off of, how will we manage our finances and whatever. And you can, go into the details of how the credit score is so backwards in so many ways, but ultimately before it, there was no way to gain debt in a way that could better your quality of life before it. So I really like to use that parallel with Sustaio. We have no way to manage our carbon. We have no way to, better our quality of life through sustainability, which ultimately connects to your health, connects to your, physical health, connects to your mental health. So it's very interconnected. It connects to your finances. Being more sustainable is usually better for your ROI, whether it's an investment in a more efficient washer dryer or whatever. So um, yeah, that's what I say to that.
I think it's quite fascinating what you mentioned. I never thought about this. I guess if your sustainability score is better, you probably have a bit of a healthier life, especially with emissions, right? Do
Yeah,
you foresee this really coming? I've never really thought too much about the kind of intersection of sustainability and health, but do you have any specific data points that you could share about the benefits of health when people are tracking these things and what you might see the future looking like if people start to do that a little bit better? Maybe it ties into your life insurance ratings or things like that.
exactly. Yeah, so imagine a world where because your Sustaio score is good, you get better financing on a home loan because you're less of a climate risk, or you've proven that you'll install solar panels or a terrascape that saves water. So you're less of a risk to that lender because you're going to improve the quality of the home and bring up its value. The same thing for insurers. Like we've talked to insurance agencies, and they want to make sure they're attracting the most sustainable consumer, because they are this better insurer. They're the cheaper insurer for them in the long run, but they have no way to do that today. So lenders and insurance agencies are coming up with this big problem of, we want to attract the more sustainable consumer because they are less of a risk when it comes to financial investments. So yeah, it really comes full circle when you think about it that way.
That is pretty interesting. I think a lot of people are afraid of some, especially in the U.S. I think a lot of people tend to be very like skeptical, at least from in the Midwest where I'm from, of data and tracking. But it's like ultimately there's a lot of benefits that if you can work together on it, between the consumers and the companies and the corporates to really create a better world if you work together. And I think it's quite interesting, and it's beneficial, obviously, for the more responsible people, right? Which is where the transparency aspect all comes in. Um, I just wanted to get your comment on this one thing that might seem a little bit controversial. I don't mean to poke the bear, but I heard this on another one of the shows. I recorded it with Aaron Fitzgerald, and he had pointed out to me that back in the day, he stated that the kind of sustainability score was created by the corporates to offload the guilt onto the consumer. I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts about this on, and if you believe and agree with that original kind of origin of it, and then what it is now today, how is it different, et cetera. I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, totally. The carbon footprint was totally created by gas and oil companies. That's a true fact. But ultimately, like, it's a good thing. Like, as a consumer, if you care about climate change and you care about reducing your footprint, you should probably care about managing your carbon. And it goes back to that whole, you know, how entities, like how corporations and humans interact in the modern day versus the industrial revolution or even 20 years ago. But I would say it's a good thing to call out your companies that you want to do better, but you know, pointing fingers is not the best way to solve this problem. And ultimately, corporations are responsible for, what is it, like, I don't know, 80% of climate change. But ultimately, like, there is this other percentage that a consumer is responsible for. And I personally think that, you know, if you want to be an advocate in the modern day change for innovation, then you care about this stuff and you work towards sustainable change. And it's a holistic thing. So it's in your personal life, it's in your work life, it's within the culmination of the choices you want to make in the world.
Yeah, I mean, also obviously the reason corporates are the big emitters is because the consumers purchase those things, right? So
Yeah.
I understand. Like, I think there's a lot of people who might kind of stomp the drum about being sustainable, but and maybe when it comes down to, like, oh, down with fast fashion, but then you see them and they're definitely wearing fast fashion. And it's like
Yeah.
it's got to be a two-way street, and there has to be accountability. And I think that's quite interesting to see. And I think to me, I think there's beyond that. There's like a certain philosophical benefit that can come out of it, of people once they start to take responsibility. It'll probably change a lot of things in a much better way too, right? Not just their sustainability, but how they treat other people. And I'm a big proponent of that kind of positive butterfly effect, if you will. But
Yeah.
I think we can put a pin in it there. I want to talk a little bit now about the process of building a company. So could you just maybe walk us through like the story of, because this was just like a year and a half ago when you started kind of really launching into this heavily, or was it about 2 years ago? When was this roughly?
No, I started this actually March. So I just wrapped at the Grand Canyon, got off the Grand Canyon, and decided I was going to actually, bite the bullet and start Sustaio Incorporate and hit the ground running. But then when we got out of the Grand Canyon, the world was totally different. We had no idea the pandemic had spread to the US and that the whole country was shut down. So that was ultimately like a silver lining in a sense, because then I was like, cool, I'm going to start this company. I can't do anything else. So I'm just kind of like, was like, what do I need to do? What do I know how to do? Who do I need to find to help me learn how to do other things? And like, what can I just absolutely not do? So that was kind of like what 2020 was all about, was just figuring out, I was like, okay, I've got this idea. I want to take it to market. Now what? I've had businesses previously, but never businesses that I was going to try to get VC funding for. Never businesses that I wanted to grow to national scale. And that's what Sustaio is. And that's what we're going for. And so, I had to step into the world of what's a VC. And that was like, startup 101 2020. And then in 2021, we got into Techstars, and that really accelerated my acumen and growth in terms of how to raise capital, how to quickly build a product, iterate and repeat. And then this last year, it's been a ton of pivoting in terms of what's been going on with the market, where's the best go-to-market strategy right now. And now I'm really excited that we've gotten to this point. We've made so much evolution, and we're launching this brand new product in 2023 that I'm really excited to bring to the world. So that's
Mhm.
that's the quick version of it all. But yeah, I came from the world of design. I was a designer before this. I didn't go to business school, and so it was learning all those things.
So a couple things there with the gaps that you had and you needed to learn. What were some of, I guess, the things that you did in terms of the partners and people you put around yourself, aside from going through Techstars and reading about it? What were some of the things that you did, or how did you evaluate? Hey, here's where I'm lacking, and here's where I'm going to need some support. How'd you pick your co-founders, etc.?
Yeah, totally. So I went back to my previous network. So I was like, who was a business owner or, higher up in business who really inspired me, who I learned a lot from. So, and I reached back out to all those people saying, hey, I want to start a company. What can you teach me? Like, so it was really like a lot of networking in 2020 as well, to build a network, find support, ask people questions, just ask people for help generally. And that was a huge strategy I used. And now I'm like really proud of the network I have in Colorado, on the West Coast, even in New York. Like, network is really powerful, and that's what I spent a lot of time on.
And then what was the raising process like? Because I think Techstars does a little bit of helping get intros and maybe a little bit of seed money, but can you talk a little bit about the raising process, where you're at now? What have some of the biggest challenges been, and perhaps what did you learn? What key takeaways from what to put in your pitch deck and how to pitch, etc. Just kind of general advice for other ClimateTech founders going through that raising process.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, no matter how great and ambitious and altruistic your story is as a climate tech company, it doesn't matter. The economics still has to make sense. The monetization and the scale still has to make sense for a VC to be interested in investing, because even though they're a climate tech VC, they're still a VC and they still need to get their returns. And that's, kind of the ugly truth about this business is, it's still for money. If it wasn't, we would be in the for-profit world. So I think that's the biggest thing. But luckily with business, if you're building a sustainable business, build that sustainability into the business model and the monetization structure, and apply those frameworks to every aspect of the business so that you can build a really long trajectory, big scale company that will impress VCs.
I think it's a quite interesting point. I mean, a lot of people talk about they've kind of I've noticed this whenever I listen to climate tech podcasts that people just like they get a little bit uneasy when they talk about like listen, like we're obviously here, we have to make money, etc. But the reality is that I think it helps to kind of weed out the bad ideas and to some extent, because if people are willing to pay for something, if there can be money made in the process, that means that people are willing to make some sort of sacrifice to achieve that. And especially if this is in climate tech and if you're being genuine about what you're pursuing, it's actually
Mm-hmm.
making the world a better place, and it's also making people money. So I don't think people should be so like feel so bad about it. Like it's a very good thing for everybody all around. So I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah,
um
and I think that like you can build a really sustainable company that has a great mission and a great impact on people and planet, and it can be very profitable too. And so I think like getting away from that that thought that people have ingrained into them is like, oh, it's sustainable, it should be a nonprofit, it's not scalable. I think really like putting profit with planet and those things equal each other is really powerful.
Yeah, and at some point, I mean, depending on how people's mentality change, I would assume there's going to be, maybe not. I mean, it's difficult to change people's behavior, but in an ideal scenario, I would assume there's maybe less consumption overall because I think we overconsume, especially in the West, and
Mhm.
perhaps that leaves more room for the profits to be in fewer companies, perhaps, or at least companies doing it in a better way and having more equity throughout the entire value chain, throughout the entire supply chain, rather than just a couple people taking most of it and then a little bit going off to the farmers wherever the products are coming from, for example. um, what have been some of your biggest operational challenges at the beginning here?
Yeah, like I am a very light technical person. So like I built the first generation of the software, and on a no code, low code platform. Like I said before, like I could build people's marketplaces and direct to consumer, you know, commerce, but I didn't know anything about like back end web development to build an app that was taking in data, changing that data, and putting a output so that the user could grow and evolve with the app. So that was a big learning curve for me. So it was a lot of like self teaching, but then also um, I tried to find a co-founder, a technical co-founder, and was unsuccessful. And so I knew I needed to raise money to hire my technical firm. or team. And so I ended, today say Sustaio has a technical partner that's an external dev firm. They're great. There's many ways to build your technology. Technology and software is so democratized today. I don't think you need to take the traditional path of you have to get a CTO co-founder for this to be successful. It's, there's just so many routes you can take. And, I took a very untraditional one because that's just the way the cards fell.
Mm-hmm. What would your advice be to other people entering the space, especially maybe people in the same boat with a non-technical background?
Yeah, I would say network, talk to people, try to find a co-founder. Like, I think technical or not, just having a co-founder would be really great. I don't have one. I'm a solo founder. So try to find a co-founder if you can. But with that, like co-founders usually break up. So, it's all just a trade-off. I think but I would say, like, yeah, try to find a technical co-founder if you're not the technical one. And if you are the technical one, you need to find your counterpart. So, find that marketing and advertising person, find that salesperson, that design person. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of options. You can hire a dev firm in the US, you can hire a dev firm outside of the US. It really depends on your connections. Like, I know a bunch of other founders that are resourcing firms that they personally know in India or in Peru because they're from Peru. And so it's like, get creative with how you want to source your dev talent if you don't have a technical co-founder, because there's so many options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that is a really big benefit of what we have in the world right now. I'm kind of curious about the methodology when building the startup now, because obviously this is a ClimateTech startup. Have you, I guess maybe you could just speak to it openly, kind of like what your goal was. Was it to go straight for revenue right away? Was it about customer acquisition? Because I know that kind of traditional software business is just, customer acquisition as low as possible and as much as possible, and
Mhm.
then worry about revenue later. Could you talk a little bit about that being focused on sustainability rather than just getting some big valuation just to go for the next round, et cetera?
Yeah, so we've gone through so many pivots. We were originally a direct to consumer. So during that time, we were focused on getting as many users as possible to prove traction. And then we changed to a B2B. And then we changed to a B2B to C. And then that's a whole can of worms where you have to build a double-sided marketplace at the same time, which is a lot of work. So you need customers and users. And then we transitioned to B2B, and then we transitioned back to B2B to C. So it's really just been a big journey. And ultimately, I would say though, in this market, revenue is the main thing founders should be focused on and startups should be focused on, especially if they want to raise VC capital. There's a bunch of capital still out there that has to be invested, but these traction targets are getting higher. The thresholds are raising because of the financial market and the possible
Mm-hmm.
recession that we're going into.
Yeah, and I think it's really important advice. I think a lot of people this has usually been my problem with the VC model kind of traditionally is that it just forces people to just focus on these vanity metrics to some extent and it's just
Yeah.
constantly pushing and pushing and pushing. And then before you know it, even the VCs are kind of encouraging really stupid behavior, which leads to kind of crazy evaluations and then collapses, right? So the incentive structure has to be aligned. That's
And,
probably sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, and like if you bootstrap your company, you're probably going to make more money off of it in the long term when you sell or get acquired. Like you're probably like I've known people who bootstrapped their company, didn't take any VC capital, and they made out better than people who took millions of dollars in VC capital. So it's just like I just want to build a really good product and a really sustainable company, like a functioning sustainable company, not just like green sustainability, but something that actually makes a difference in the world and makes a really good profit in a
Mhm.
sustainable manner.
And I think if people can realize that the point of the business is to make the money, not to raise the next round, right? You should be getting to a point where you have the revenue, and that's good, right? Because then the rest of the revenue or rest of the the funding dollars left can go to something else, right? It's not that we're trying to capture all the money and constantly raise a new round like Uber for 10 years, right? You really need to get to a point of profit. So that's quite interesting. I think it's going to. I really do believe that ClimateTech is going to change the VC landscape from that perspective, but also from the hardware side of things becoming more like a lower barrier to entry because people are going to have to get comfortable with hardware. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see.
No, that's
Um,
amazing. Yeah, that's really cool.
how do you look at partnerships? Do you have a lot of partnerships that you work with and try to help with, either customer acquisition or just ways that you work with other partnership channels to help get you in front of customers? Because I usually hear that that's a big problem. That's the biggest challenge is just getting customers initially.
Yeah, totally. And partnerships are tough too, because partnerships can distract, they can send false signals, they can lead you down the wrong path. They can also lead to your next customer. So I don't know, it's really tricky. Their partnerships are hard to get. And when you do get them, they might be the wrong ones. And but they're also sometimes the right ones. So I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that. I'm still figuring that part out.
Hmm. Yeah, I do think it's interesting. There's a few of my friends who are really big into the partnership space and trying to kind of create content around this. I'm always curious to ask that question because they're big believers in it, and I know from my experience that it tends to be difficult to create these. And I agree with you. You have to make sure it's right. Kind of have to beta test that partnership, if you will. But then again, it comes down to having some level of good faith in each other, and I sometimes think that, at least in the US, it feels like people don't necessarily like doing business the old-fashioned way, where you just have relationships that they want to, have everything in writing because they're all afraid of getting sued, etc. So um, it's a
That's
bit of
true.
a bit of a situation.
Yeah.
What has talent been like? I know you probably haven't hired a whole lot yet, but I'm just kind of curious to hear about talent, like your thoughts on where you try to find talent from. What have the challenges been? What are your thoughts on whether or not they need to have, certain college experience, etc.?
Yeah. No, I think working experience is so much more important than college experience. Somebody who can send a clean, like at the lowest end of expectation, somebody who can send a clean email that has no typos in it, and it's just being able to communicate well and just like have follow up, do what you say you're going to do. I think that comes from the working world just as much as it can come from the collegiate world. So I don't really care about degrees. But finding talent has been pretty great in terms of like a lot of people reach out to us, a lot of people want to work for climate tech companies. However, the talent we need is very expensive. We need data scientists, we need, really smart back-end engineers. So that's a tricky part. It's like there's a bunch of people that want to work for this company, but can we afford them? No, not until we raise a big round. So it's really finding the people who are really passionate,
Mm-hmm.
who have the affordances in life to not work for their market rate and take equity instead. And that equity will pay off big for them if this company really does what I want it to do. But that's a big risk on their end for a company that they might not get what out of it what they're putting into it. So the world's totally different now. It's like people don't care about working like, so you have a startup, big deal. Like everybody, like that dream has been demystified, I feel like, and people are
Mm-hmm.
not willing to work for free. They're not willing to work for companies they don't believe in on a values-based level. Luckily for us, we have, we are a values-based company, obviously. So I don't know, talent's tricky. I think it will always be tricky. But yeah, it's not the world anymore where you can say, come work for my company for free for 2 years and we'll see if it works out. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
cool, I at least need half, if not 2/3 of what I was making at my big job at
Mm-hmm.
Google. So I joined your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, from the perspective of probably a lot of these people, when they started making good money, they kind of got set into a certain lifestyle, and it's like they don't have an option to, even if they really, really wanted to, go work for climate tech. So I maybe make that advice to people who really want to get into climate tech: consider reducing your expenses, to a point, or saving some money aside so you can take those bets if you find a company that you think is really has an opportunity to reach the moon, because otherwise you're going to be precluded from taking those opportunities.
Totally. And it's like, I'm like mad at the companies who are like, it's like we need to define as a like globally when a company cannot call itself a startup anymore. Because I'm so frustrated with the companies that are like, we're a startup, but we like have all this revenue and we have all this money to pay your salaries and like, but we're a startup, so come work for our cool startup. It's like, no, you're a functioning business. Like, don't use that word anymore because then people look at your jobs where you're paying like $300,000 in salaries, and then they're looking at my job description, which doesn't even come close to that. So like, give us a fighting chance over here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is some benefit though. I mean, if you can, it takes longer, but if you can find the right people who are willing to do that, then you have, like, they're committed, right? And
Yeah.
it's a painful truth, but at the same time, like, you kind of need that right at the beginning, because you can't have people like coming to you every month, complaining about everything. It's got to be, head down and make it happen. But
Yep.
there is a certain level of it's not necessarily equitable. Like, there's some people who just can't afford to do that because they have families
Yep.
to take care of, right? And that is the tough truth. So I hope there's ways to solve that. Maybe that's another topic.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's like to bring up like gender equality, like a lot of women don't apply for this company because the salaries are lower because they can't afford to take that pay cut because they aren't getting, cuz it's just like this whole gender study too, like like there's just for every 50 people that I've talked to about working at Sustaio, it's been like a 50-to-1 ratio literally. And that's because of many many different reasons, but it's wild, and it just goes to show like generational wealth is a real thing, and gender wealth is a real thing, and yeah, more women
the
in STEM. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I
Support.
mean, there's just there's so many ways. Like, I think it can be overcome over time, like to try to close that gap. But I just keep thinking about it quite often. It's just like there's no real quick way to close that, right? Because the people who have that money have the opportunity to take the time off, right? They have the opportunity to take those, very what we say, prestigious jobs that don't pay a lot just for the network, right? And that continues to benefit them because of their parents or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And I do think that ultimately, if we really want to elevate society as a whole, we're going to have to try to solve that at some point. I don't know how, but that's something that has to be solved.
Yeah.
What about, to go to a little bit brighter topic? What about your outlook on the future? What are your thoughts on, I guess, this space in particular, maybe broadly climate tech? I was really curious to hear because you're in the trenches. What do you see coming down the line, and what are you excited for?
Yeah, I'm excited for the adversity that this next 12 months will bring to my companies and many others. There's going to be a lot of great companies that come out of this economic downturn, and I hope Sustaio is one of them. Sustaio will be one of them, but that's what I'm excited about. Is out of adversity comes great things, and so I'm excited to see what comes down the turnpike that way. And then also like with the IRA, with all these climate tech VCs starting up, there's a lot of money out there for climate tech right now. And that's really exciting because it didn't used to be that way. And even the difference I hear from VCs in terms of the beginning of 2022 of, January 2022 last year and 2023 this year, VCs were like, yeah, we're a climate tech VC, but we don't know what our thesis is yet. Come back in 12 months. And now they like got it figured out. So like it's really cool that they've started their fund, they've hired the associates to do all the research and pinpoint what their exact climate thesis is. And so it's like it's getting more micro, which is great. It's like we're not a climate tech company, we invest in sustainable companies. It's like we're a climate tech VC that invests in solar sophisticated software, so it's getting very pinpointed, which is great because then that funding as a company, you can figure out who is going to fund my company versus who's just blowing smoke. So it's really cool to see the VC landscape evolve that way.
Hmm. Have you noticed any other changes in the landscape from those 12 months? I'm curious if there's any other items that you would point out.
Yeah, it goes back to just the economic downturn and like traction thresholds being higher for younger companies. So I'll talk to angel groups that are like, you need 500K trailing revenue to get our 50K investment. And I was like, what? No, just get out of here. So it's like things like that. That's like worst case scenario. But then also, with bigger VCs, um, you do have to just have higher traction thresholds, which is fine, but it kind of sucks for the founder, and the company. But that's just what the market's doing right now.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I was really, especially, I think it was the beginning of last year, if I remember correctly. There's a lot of these traditional VCs trying to enter climate tech and just really not having any clue about the challenges of climate. Like they had no idea how to really evaluate, and they were probably just kind of following a bunch of other leaders, right? They would just follow a lead VC, and the money seemed to go kind of in to the very few companies. It didn't go to as many companies. It seemed to really go into like a huge funding rounds to some of these companies, which obviously, maybe just a lack of sophistication or knowledge yet. But I think it will
Yeah.
take a bit of time to mature. My biggest hope is that we just don't see, another like a repeat of Climate Tech 1.0. I don't think we will because I think we have the infrastructure to avoid that. But I know that let's just put it this way. I don't think that the VC space is necessarily always the most mature, and they sometimes like to make really dumb decisions and then go back and say, no, we're not going to do that again. We got the hangover. We're gonna go sober up now. But anyways, this has been really, I think overall we talked about a lot of really great things. We're running out of time here, so I just want to leave it up. Where can people reach you? Anything you want to mention? Specific things about where people can sign up to try the product out, etc.
Yeah, so like I said, the new product will be live very soon, just a few months. So if you want to be an early beta tester and get early access and start earning rewards faster, you should go to sustaio.com and sign up for early access there.
Awesome. Very good. I really encourage people to do this. I hope this makes a big impact, and I'm really excited to see what you guys continue to do over the coming months, and looking forward to the new launch of the product.
Cool. Thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.
All right, thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this, please do share it with somebody who might find it helpful or interesting. And then if you enjoyed the episode as well, we really appreciate any reviews that you might leave us. You might consider leaving on the Apple Podcast platform, as it really, really helps grow the show. Also recommend connecting with Olivia directly over LinkedIn, and then check out their website to sign up for their product. And then if this is your first time, please do, of course, subscribe and tap the bell for notifications to follow along on our journey. Quick note on next episode. We are joined by Teague Egan, the founder and CEO of Energy X. This is a really, really fun episode. First off, the tech they are working on is just absolutely incredible. For essentially what they're doing is for lithium brine, they are able to extract about 90% of the lithium in the brine, compared to the current methods, which usually gets somewhere around 20 or 30% out of the brine. And for those unfamiliar, brine is a type of kind of like a salty water with mixed minerals, and they have to extract the various minerals through certain processes. And we talk about that all in the podcast, in the episode. And then the second reason I really, really enjoyed this was it's just a great episode, another example, because Teague has such an interesting story of building a highly technical climate tech company without having any technical background or having any kind of prior experience in climate tech in particular. So really, just a really fun episode. Super excited to share that next time, so stay tuned for that. And as always, thank you for joining us on Clean Tech is the podcast. We will see you next time.